Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for being here today. I'm Angela, and if you're new, welcome. If you are back, thank you so much for returning. And I have another fantastic guest for you here today. His name is Jay Deutsch, and he is a self love and mindset coach and someone who knows grief inside and out. In June of 2015, Jay's world was shattered when he lost his soulmate of 26 years, Larissa, to suicide. He was left to raise their two children, who were just 3 and 13 at the time. On the outside, he kept going for the kids, but inside, he was numb. He drank, smoked, isolated, he didn't sleep, and he lived with constant guilt, self blame, and hopelessness. He got his children the help they needed, but he didn't believe healing was possible for him. And then, after nearly 5 years of barely surviving, everything came crashing down again. He lost his job at the start of the pandemic, triggering a flood of unresolved trauma from childhood abandonment to heartbreak and grief. And what followed was what many call a dark night of the soul. And it forced him to face everything he had been avoiding. That breakdown became the beginning of his breakthrough. He dove into self discovery, neuroscience, NLP, mindset work, emotional healing, and spiritual growth. He read, researched, cried, meditated, and he transformed. He learned how our thoughts shape our reality, how the nervous system responds to grief and negative self talk, and how healing happens when we stop running from our pain. So today, Jay is certified in coaching and NLP, and he specializes in helping people who have lost someone rediscover who they are and find joy, self love, and meaning again. So, welcome to the show, Jay. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I found Jay when I was scrolling through Facebook. He had a post, actually, a friend alerted me to it. And I read through it and I was like, wow, this guy actually thinks like I do. Like this put into what you had written, had put into words thoughts that I had. And I find that happens a lot. If people write things and you can resonate with it, it just having words put to what you're thinking is awesome.
Yeah,
And so I really felt like I should reach out to you. And so I did.
I,
And
I
here we
appreciate
are.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know in your bio you talk about, the challenge that you have gone through and that dark night of the soul. And that's something that I've talked about too. Mine happened like Mother's Day ish. Um, Tell us a little bit more about that dark night of the soul and how that's helped to transform you.
It's really hard to describe. It was like, I guess the lifting of the veil is the way most people describe it. Everything that I had believed from childhood crumbled in front of me.
Hmm.
And it was I saw a meme once where it was someone standing on the edge of a cliff, and there was a hand flicking the person off the cliff, and then there was a hand on the other side of the cliff also catching them. And it was like to describe what a spiritual awakening is like. And it was almost as if me had just fallen away and left just my soul behind.
Yeah.
But I was still trapped in this physical being that's Jay, and still trying to navigate life as a father with a young daughter and a young son, working in a job, making money, going to the supermarket, going to the post office, going to parent teacher conferences, and being the human that I was supposed to, the role that I was supposed to be playing in life, but having a deeper understanding that none of it really mattered or meant anything.
Mm.
And the entire process, this dark night of the soul, was almost like everything was taken away from me and nothing was taken away from me at the same time.
Wow.
So it was, I mean, the way people describe it, just the word spiritual awakening is just so minute compared to what actually happens. And, I was raised Jewish. I did the bar mitzvah. Nothing ever resonated with me. Religion, society, the norm, none of it ever fit for me. I always felt like the black sheep in my family, with my friends in school and college and the fraternity. Nothing ever really felt like it fit.
Mm.
And then after my awakening, I realized why and that none of it was supposed to fit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And how profound. I mean, did you think, how did this, I mean, do you ever think back about how could this all just happen? We go through lives, and I talk about this a lot about how we're told that we need the good job and we need to, raise our family and then when we retire, we'll be happy, I guess, is kind of how that story goes. And there's a lot of people who have the fancy car, the nice house, all the money that they could want and still aren't happy.
Yes,
And
absolutely. I see that all the time.
yeah. And so, this huge dark night of the soul. And when you're in the darks of those depthness, or the depths of those darkness, whatever you want to call it, I just remember thinking, yeah, everything that I believed, I no longer, I questioned it all. Like I didn't know what to believe anymore.
Hmm.
I wasn't sure what was true and what wasn't true. It was almost like it had all been wiped and I was starting over.
Yeah. And, it really hit me because of the 5 years of grief.
Yeah.
I was literally stuck in a hole that I dug myself. And, when I talk to people who aren't there, they just totally don't get it. They fall into that typical victim mindset that this is happening to me and I'll never be happy again. And, the negative self-talk. And, after that 5 years of beating myself up, I guess that the awakening was somehow making sense of all of it and understanding that none of this is real to begin with. And
Mhm.
I often wondered, I see a lot of videos online now of young people who are awakened and spiritual and on the journey. And sometimes I wonder, why did it take me my whole life?
Right.
Why couldn't I awaken in my 20s and not go through all of those years of playing the game, the
Hmm.
matrix, living in the matrix, so to speak? And a big part of it is just to not ask why and to just understand that this is the role I selected, the part that I wanted to play in this big movie. For whatever reason, I agreed to it, and I'm just enjoying it for what it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's beautiful when a person can just allow what we feel is meant to happen, and to be to just find the joy in each day, which I don't know, can be hard sometimes, when you're going
Oh,
through.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I still see people say good days and bad days. And I think, I've just learned that there's no such thing as a good day or a bad day. There's just days. There's now, there's the present.
Mm,
And it only means what we choose for it to mean.
right.
So I try to just accept everything as it comes like I chose it. And I just push through focusing on joy and happiness and gratitude. When I tell people that I'm grateful for my loss, they look at me almost like I'm crazy. Like, how can you be grateful for loss? And trying to explain to someone who just doesn't see the gratitude in growth and healing and moving forward is like talking to a wall, so I don't even explain it.
Yeah. 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 And I think you do have to come to a certain place to be able to accept that or to be able to even try to understand that. And I know that was the struggle I found when I first realized what my grief really was and started to kind of define it in my own mind. Then I realized there's so many people out there that I could not, I don't know, I couldn't explain it to them because I just know it's when you're in, and I was that person too when it first happened. I know what it's like, and you know what it's like to be in the wallows of that and in the sorrow and that despair. And it's really hard to see beyond your own face when you're in that place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this dark night of the soul, and as I interview people, lots of people talk about this. It's
Mhm.
like that awakening piece, right? Whether it happens suddenly in a certain circumstance, or they have a near death experience, or there's something that spurs that forward and they just realize that there's something way bigger than just this human life. And we're playing the game until we're not.
Absolutely. And then when we learn the rules of the game, it makes it a lot much more fun.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, for sure. So tell me a little bit more about, the research that you did and how you're using that now to help people.
So the research kind of fell in my lap. About the same time as my awakening, I found myself in a relationship, my first relationship after my loss, and the person had mentioned the phrase twin flame. And I had never heard the phrase before, the label. I didn't know what it was or what it meant, so I started looking online. The relationship was very short-lived, as they usually are. It lasted 3 months. And that is what kind of triggered the beginning of my, not my, I'd say the entire grief process was my dark night of the soul, but this is what triggered me pulling out of it. I started doing research online. I created a new Facebook profile, and a lot of the people that were being attracted to my new account were also awakened souls, psychics, witches, warlocks, everyone involved in the supernatural.
Mhm.
And someone suggested reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, yes.
And I got the audiobook and I was listening to it to and from work every day until it was done, and I wanted more. So I found The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer and I listened
Mm.
to that one. And this just created almost like it turned my mind into a sponge and I needed to know more. So I started Googling spirituality and, I found Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, and I
Nice.
started getting into the neuroscience. And then when COVID hit, I was let go of my job. They were closing down, and everyone in the company was sitting around crying, worrying what they were going to do, heartbroken that they were losing their jobs. And honestly, it was one of the best days of my life. I literally stood up. I thanked my boss for the opportunity. I waved goodbye to everyone at work, and I skipped out the door carrying my box of stuff, got in the car, flipped on the audiobook on the way home, drove home with the windows open and the music blasting. And when I got home, on my desktop was an ad for the Coaching Masters, which is an online coaching school. And it was almost like a divine message that this is your
Mm.
path.
Mm.
So I clicked, I signed up. And in addition to the coaching certification, they offered an introduction to NLP, which I had never heard of, neuro linguistics programming. So I signed up for that certification as well, and it opened the floodgates. And I went on YouTube and I started following every spiritual speaker, Dolores Cannon, After School, I mean, the list just goes on and on. And learning about how this physical entity, our body, works just became so intriguing to me, especially that I was coming out of the season of grief. What was making me feel? Because for most of my life, I blamed my parents, my toxic mom, my obnoxious sister, my dad, the divorce, the bullies at school, my boss, my job, everything outside of me that I had been taught to blame for my feelings. And I finally learned to take accountability for the chemical reactions that I was creating in my own nervous system. Learning that the vibrational frequency of thoughts, emotions, and feelings and how they affect our aura and our mood and our physical presence and the reality that our mind creates.
Hmm.
For most of my life, I believed that I was a victim of everything outside of me. And once I learned that my brain is creating everything outside of me based on what I tell it to create for me, it was just it was just a mind-blowing moment that I have the power to create reality.
Hmm.
So my research kind of just blossomed into, manifestation and just everything that I could possibly absorb about spirituality and the human existence and contradicting psychology and medicine and the typical rules of society that most people follow.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. And so now you're using all of this.
Yes, so
And
now I have my own coaching practice. I've been doing this for 5 years. And, in my coaching training, they said to pick a niche that's closest to you, something that represents who you are. And the reason I picked self-love and mindset is because I'm not a grief coach,
Mm,
because a grief coach teaches someone how to grieve.
right.
Just like a baseball coach teaches someone how to play baseball, a voice coach teaches someone how to sing. I didn't want to be your typical grief coach that teaches people how to cope, how to survive, how to move through grief. And 90 to 95% of the people that I talk to, grief cracked them open,
Hmm.
but exposed a much deeper pattern of self-sabotage, lack of self-confidence, identity issues, and a lack of self-love. So, as a self-love and mindset coach, my job is more to help people look beyond the grief and the suffering and the pain and to look much deeper and to find who they truly are instead of searching for who they used to be, if that makes sense.
Yep. Hmm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
most of the people that are stuck in the pattern of grief are searching for who they used to be when they were in the relationship.
Mm,
And they try to get back to who they were. And a big part of what I teach people is to let go of that identity and search for who you're meant to be. So it's more of a journey of self-discovery and less about grieving.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about Eckhart Tolle because he was the one that um, I read when my husband was sick with cancer. And it just opened my mind so much to that whole concept that you just talked about. Um, how suffering, he talks about, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, absolutely optional. It's all about the mind and the way that we frame our thoughts. And yeah, and there's, you know, as I worked through my grief, it was really about changing my thoughts about, you know, who I was. And you're talking about that whole identity thing. I didn't know who I was anymore, which was kind of a gift because, I lost my job. I was no longer a wife because I had no husband and I moved. And so everything was just ripped out from underneath of me very quickly.
Yes,
And so then I was forced to figure it out because I didn't want to stay in that place where that sorrow is always hanging around, right?
absolutely.
So it was like, how do I break free from this? And who's going to help me with this? Because I tried to do it on my own and I couldn't. So I needed that guidance and that help to help me through that. Yeah.
Yep, and that's exactly the guidance that I help people with now.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's amazing thing. So, um, how do you work now? Do you work online a lot? Do you work in person with people?
Everything I do is virtual, one-on-one. I use Google Meets video chat, and I offer a 12-week program. And in the 12 weeks, it's custom for each person's individual situation, their triggers, their grief, their experience. And I create a custom program that addresses their specific needs to learn how to build their new identity
Hmm.
and how to let go of the thoughts that create the physical responses of pain, how to re-regulate their nervous system, how to, learn to sleep again, learn to be calm, learn to be peaceful and, through meditation, through breathing exercises, breaking language patterns of negative self-talk. And the list goes on and on. They get my full toolbox of neuroscience and the tools that helped pretty much save me and my children.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing because um, I relate to that, in so many ways of having now your children were much younger than mine. Mine were adults and really on their own when their dad passed away. But it's your heart goes out to them first. It's like um because you're a parent, right? And so there's
Absolutely, absolutely. My parental instincts kicked in. I mean,
mm,
my initial thought, sorry to say, my initial thought when the police were standing at the door was to grab the cop's gun.
mm,
My immediate thought was to join her.
yeah.
And then my second thought was the kids are upstairs and they haven't awakened yet. They need breakfast, and someone has to be here for them. So my kids were my why, and
Yeah.
I put myself completely secondary. I got my daughter enrolled in daycare. My son, I got him into a children's bereavement group at our local hospice, and I made sure that they got all of the care that they needed to assure that they made it through this. And I had given up on myself completely. I believe the memes that it never gets easier. In the support group, they said you learn to live with it, you grow around it. They had the ball in the jar poster on the wall.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was done. I was done for.
Mm,
There was no, my life was over as I knew it.
yeah.
And, over the years through my healing journey and my awakening, I realized that my kids aren't even real, that they're just reflections of me, and that all that exists is consciousness, and I am the only one that matters,
Hmm.
and that the care and love that I was giving them was a reflection of the care and love that I was withholding from myself.
Wow. How profound.
So that's when I really dove in to healing me. And
Hmm.
now, I mean, my daughter, she's 13 now. She's one of the most popular girls in school. My son is 23. He got married this year, and they both just love life.
Oh, it's so amazing. And we talk about that a lot about self-care and when you say, I had to put myself first, there's this underlying thing that we've been taught about how that's so selfish, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
selfish. to do that. And yet, if you don't look after you and you don't, if you're not your best version of you, then how the heck do you even begin to nurture or love your kids the way they need to be loved? You know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think a lot of us don't realize that. And like you say, you just throw yourself into the role, and you're just doing what you know, what you don't
Well,
know,
it took
you
my
don't
my
know.
son, my son came up to me one day when he was probably 15 or 16, and he called me out, and he
Mm.
said, I know you're faking it. The fake smile and the fake laugh and the I'm fine. He said, we see right through it.
Wow.
That broke me open a little bit,
Mhm.
but I didn't know what to do other than just to keep doing it.
Right,
I had to be strong for my kids, and I was always taught that being the strong man meant you suppress your feelings, you put on a smile, you go to work, you pay the bills, and your mental health doesn't matter.
right.
And I realized that I was molding my children into that same mold.
Mm.
And I had to break it. I had to break the generational trauma. I didn't want my kids to grow up thinking that that was how you live life. And
Right.
I'm really grateful that I did because my kids are special.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and their mother would be so proud. She is.
Not would be, she is. And
Yeah.
she shows me very often.
Yeah. That's amazing. So tell people a little bit more about how they can reach you.
I'm on Facebook at Self Love and Mindset Coach, TikTok, Self Love and Mindset Coach, Instagram, Self Love and Mindset Coach, and my website is selfloveandmindsetcoach.com. Pretty easy to remember.
That's perfect. Yes, and we'll make sure we have those links. And obviously, you work one-on-one with people. Do you do groups as well?
I do sometimes offer groups for general topics, but because grief and self-love and mindset issues are very personal, I keep the deep dark work for one-on-one. I did write two books which give a lot of insight into what I teach, but the real healing happens in the program.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. And so, do you have any, I would say, advice or final words of, that you want to share with everyone?
I'd say the most important thing that I could leave the audience with is no matter what you've heard, grief is not love. Healing is.
Mm.
And learn to talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love because your life depends on it.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, and that brings us full circle because that's really what the post was about. It was about the fact that grief is not love. And I think, it's worth re-mentioning that because um, we often will say, and I've heard this many times, that, grief is just love with nowhere to go. And I always felt like that was such a weird thing. I just couldn't grasp that concept. And when you had written it that way, I was like, wow, it doesn't fit in my world, and we have to come up with our own truths around that.
Absolutely. And the original quote was from a poem about pet loss.
Mm,
And, the same way the five stages of grief were taken out of context
yes.
from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's study on terminally ill patients and then thrown into the blanket of grief, things that sound comforting or validating become the norm.
Hmm.
And one thing that I'm really against is validation because I think validation is very toxic because they say your feelings are valid, but the word valid means truth, and not all of our feelings are based in truth. They
Mm.
are real when we feel them, they're real, but they're usually based in lies that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
So, our feelings are not valid. And grief is on the opposite vibrational frequency of love. Grief is pain, it's suffering, it's sadness, it's hopelessness. And the chemical components are adrenaline and cortisol.
Mm,
Love is life. Love is beauty. Love is light. Love is happiness. Love is joy. Love is good memories. Love is who we are. And the chemical components of love are oxytocin and dopamine. And those are very different chemicals. They don't kill us or cause cancer or illness or disease.
right.
So, anyone who thinks that grief is love, just really think about that. Was love ever meant to hurt or kill?
Right. Yeah. And it's something that's coming in right now, and this was my research, is that I consider grief to be a process rather than an emotion. I think it's so much more than that. And so, when I wrote my book, that's really what it was about, is like the process of grief. And so, when you were saying, it's not love, it's like, well, it's not. It's not. In my own definition, it doesn't fit either. And so I appreciated that perspective. And yeah, and I appreciate everything that you've shared today. I think people have heard some really profound wisdom here. And so I encourage you to go check out Jay's social media and everything that he has, his books, and maybe do that program. I think it sounds like that would be, if it feels right to you, that would be your path. So yeah, I encourage people to check that out.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for taking the time again. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed being here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for listening, and bye for now.